It's the height of the Cold War. In New York, a man mysteriously falls from a hotel window. In Kentucky, a secret experiment feeds prisoners LSD for 2.5 months. In Montreal, a doctor delivers hundreds of electroshocks to his psychiatric patients. How far did the Central Intelligence Agency go to fight the new communist threat? Germ warfare, brainwashing, even murder. What's the real story behind the CIA's secret experiments? Manhattan, 1953. 2 a.m. on a chilly Thanksgiving weekend. The Statler Hotel on 7th Avenue. A man plunges to his death from the 13th floor. Night manager Armand Pastor is first to the scene.
I rushed out, and there I see a body lying next to this partition. I never expected him to be alive, but he was laying there looking at me, trying to speak to me. A very earnest look in his eyes, wide open. And I kept trying to speak to him to see if I could understand what he was trying to tell me.
Was it suicide or something more sinister? The dead man is 43-year-old Frank Olson, a biological weapons researcher for the Army at Fort Detrick, Maryland. What few yet know is that Frank Olson also worked for the CIA. Olson's death is just one mysterious piece in a far greater puzzle. One that would shock the average American had they only known. In the wake of World War II, the U.S. government is engaged in a large number of secret medical experiments designed to help win the Cold War. Exposing unknowing members of the public to biological and chemical agents. Developing techniques for mind control to create a so-called Manchurian candidate. Even planning assassinations on powerful third world leaders. What is the extent of these brainwashing experiments? How did the CIA become involved in such far-reaching and disturbing research? D-Day, the end of World War II, reveals the full extent of Nazi atrocities. In the concentration camps, medical research on captives includes experiments with their minds as well as their bodies.
The Germans were doing an experiment at Dachau on things like hypnosis and the use of drugs for interrogation to try and find out ways of controlling people, of making people tell against their will.
An attempt to master the art of mind control. Many Nazi physicians are prosecuted for war crimes at Nuremberg. But not all perpetrators face the court. Some scientists with potentially useful expertise are covertly brought to the United States by the CIA under Operation Paperclip.
Some of them couldn't come in through State Department visa routes because they were war criminals. So Paperclip and other projects were covert operations to route these people around the State Department requirement and get them into the country.
The new scientists are quickly put to work to counter a rapidly emerging threat, the increasing power of the Soviet Union. In the years that follow, the Cold War escalates at an alarming rate, with the superpowers competing for military and scientific supremacy. Espionage is the name of the game. The CIA embarks upon a multi-million-dollar, highly classified research program into the covert use of biological and chemical materials, an innocuous term for a frightening array of unorthodox weapons. Bacteria to infect the enemy, poisons for assassinations, truth drugs for interrogations. Spearheading these clandestine efforts is Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, head of the CIA's top-secret chemical division.
He was a chemist who developed the methodologies for the tricks of the trade, the stuff, if you watched a James Bond movie, that Q used to give.
Gottlieb works closely with Army scientists at Fort Detrick, Maryland, developing biological weapons for the agency's use.
Included in the medicine chest at Fort Detrick would have been anthrax, the plague, brucellosis, all the major diseases.
In 1953, these special operations at Fort Detrick are headed up by Frank Olson. The week of Thanksgiving, Olson's in New York on a doctor's visit, but details are sketchy. He never makes it home. His family learns of his death early Saturday morning. Olson's son Eric is 9 at the time.
And they basically said, we have something we have to tell you, and proceeded to say that my father had fallen or jumped out of a window in New York City.
The story is as vague as it is devastating.
There were no details, absolutely none. That whole confusion about fall or jump began from that first moment.
According to the medical report, Olson's neck and face are badly lacerated. At the funeral, the casket remains closed.
And the explanation there was that they said he was too badly injured to be seen.
Unbeknownst to the family, present at the funeral are 2 men from the CIA, Dr. Sidney Gottlieb and his deputy, Dr. Robert Lashbrook. For there's something Olson's family doesn't yet know. Agent Lashbrook was in the New York hotel room when Olson fell out the window and died. The mysterious circumstances of Olson's death raise many questions. Some answers lie buried in his secret life, working for the CIA. Olson's specialty is aerosol delivery systems. But by 1953, his career has evolved into top-secret research into germ warfare and more.
During his years with the government, he was very, very concerned about what he had gotten into and whether he was doing the right thing.
Together, the CIA and the Army's Special Operations plan experiments on the dispersal of their new biological weapons. More than once, they simulate an attack on an entire city. One target, the nation's most populous metropolis, New York. The intention, to evaluate how easy it is to poison a city by releasing bacteria into the subway system. Staff from Fort Detrick, posing as industrial contractors, position themselves over the subway vents. They surreptitiously drop harmless bacteria onto the tracks, while monitoring agents wait to take samples throughout the network. Turbulence from the trains quickly carries the germs through the tunnels, infecting the entire subway system in a matter of minutes. With a more lethal substance, a similar attack on an enemy city could be efficient and deadly. The CIA is not alone in its effort to develop new weapons against the communists. America forms a tripartite agreement with Canada and Great Britain, the 3 nations working together to win the Cold War. British research into biochemical warfare is carried out at the Army base in Porton Down, southwest England.
Porton Down led the world in biochemical research during the 30s and 40s. Porton Down knew about the attempt to infiltrate the subway system in New York. There was a constant exchange of information. It was very normal on any given day to find 1 or more American scientists at Porton Down.
In May 1953, scientists at Porton Down are researching one of the most lethal nerve agents known to man, sarin. The experiments are conducted on military volunteers, but the young servicemen have no idea what they are letting themselves in for.
On the board there was a separate notice, typed, which said in so many words, volunteers wanted to help find a cure for the common cold. Those taking part will receive extra pay. I knew nothing about biochemical warfare. I was unbelievably naive.
By volunteering, Ken Earl becomes an unsuspecting guinea pig in the war against the Soviets. On May 4th at Porton Down, he and 5 other Air Force men are led into a small room by 2 technicians.
We were told by the 2 men to roll up the left sleeve so the left arm was exposed. These 2 men then took 2 pieces of material and they taped them to our forearm. They then gave us each a respirator and that we were not, under any circumstances, to take off the respirator. And the door was sealed behind us. It was very, very poky, a small building. And I found out since it was a gas chamber, which puts the fear of death into you, of course. But this technician, with a vial and a pipette, went round each of us, and he dripped onto this piece of material 20 drops in 2 rows. And it was a colourless liquid. I didn't know what it was. I didn't question it.
The clear liquid is sarin nerve agent. It is quickly absorbed into the arm through the skin. The effects are immediate.
I became absolutely claustrophobic. I didn't know what sheer terror there is in being trapped and not being able to breathe properly. You feel you can't breathe. I was sweating profusely. And I felt so ill. And I now, even today, have nightmares about it. After half an hour, we were released, gasping and spluttering and sweating into the open air. Beautiful sunny May morning. Absolute bliss. What a wonderful thing to be alive.
The corresponding paperwork clearly states the purpose of the experiment is to determine the lethal dose of sarin. They quickly get their answer.
2 days later, another group of 6 had exactly the same thing done to them. But sitting in my seat was a young 20-year-old called Ronald Madison. And, quite frankly, he was dead within 45 minutes, the most hideous death anybody can ever have. Foaming at the mouth, an ambulance driver described it as like frog spawn coming out of his mouth. Terrible death.
Based on the dates in his passport and known previous visits to Porton Down, there is a good chance that Frank Olson witnesses this fatal experiment. According to investigative reporter Gordon Thomas, Olson voices his concerns to a man named William Sargent.
Dr. Sargent was the most eminent psychiatrist in Britain. He ran the Department of Psychological Medicine in St. Thomas's Hospital.
During the Cold War, Sargent's expertise is sought by both British and American intelligence.
He would decide whether one of our agents, one of MI5 or 6 agents, was okay, whether you're going to blow the whistle or not.
Frank Olson tells Sargent what he's seen at Porton Down.
He told him, I've seen things that shouldn't be going on.
Sargent apparently has doubts about Olson. Can the American still be trusted with top-secret research of the Cold War? By summer 1953, the Korean War is ending. Shocking news has flooded the airwaves. Captured American pilots confessed to dropping biological weapons on North Korea.
The germ bombs were loaded 15 minutes before our mission, while ordinarily our aircraft were loaded 2 hours or more before a mission.
The U.S. vehemently denies the charge.
The United States has not and is not using germ warfare of any kind in Korea.